3 questions. So one would be on software as a service, another would be platform as a service, and another might be infrastructure as a service. So keep that in mind. In addition to that, you might actually see some questions on, let me get rid of some windows here. You might actually see some questions on the, you might actually see some questions on the different types of virtualization, and specifically the hypervisors. So if you're not familiar with these, that's okay. If you're not familiar with these, then you need to at least become a little bit more familiar with them in order for you to be able to answer some of these questions correctly. So typically, whenever we're talking about virtual machines, a hypervisor is a software component that typically will manage different virtual components. And in this particular case, that can include, but not be limited to, 2 different types of virtual machines, or different types of hypervisors. One is the type 1 hypervisor that you see right here. And then the other one is a type 2 hypervisor. So any virtual assets, including virtual machines or software-defined networks or virtual storage area networks, virtual vSANs or SDNs, they have hypervisors, and the hypervisor would be the component that manages that virtual asset. But they also give the bad guys an attack vector that's an additional attack vector for that particular target. So it's important that even though it's a hypervisor, it's important that whoever's hosting it keeps it up to date with the appropriate patches, whether it's operating systems and if it's running on the bare metal, the hypervisor as well. These have to be kept up to date. They have to be kept up to date. It's super important whenever that happens, because we have this idea or this notion that it's sandboxed. And you may have heard of that before, where the virtual machine runs inside of a sandbox. And just like, when we were kids, or if our kids are playing in the sandbox, we want to keep them in there and all of the sand in that sandbox. So it won't be able to read and write to other applications within the operating system if we sandbox it, so it's contained. And that idea is a process that we typically will call confinement, where we can only read and write using these hypervisors from certain memory locations and resources. And so that hypervisors, like the popular ones, VMware, the VirtualBox, they provide things like process isolation and memory protection, and really give us boundaries that help to isolate, but also give limits on instructions and addresses that resources can access. And so typically with virtualization, you'll have the bare metal, where it'll be installed on like an EXX cluster for VMware, and then you'll have another one that is one that the normal people would use, like the independent users instead of a corporation, would be the type 2, which is a hosted operating system where it is dependent. So maybe for the type 2 here, you might be running Windows as the host, and then so that's Windows as the host operating system, like most of us do. And then underneath that host operating system, you can have n number of guest operating systems that are underneath it. So you can have, a guest operating system, a guest operating system, and a guest operating system. Usually it gives you this idea or this keyword that oftentimes you'll hear people say, whether it's in cloud computing or virtualization, it has elasticity, which it can expand and contract depending on the needs of the user. And because of that, that has been why it has been so attractive for so many years to use virtualization.